Now, the rest of the story. At birth, both of this poor baby's feet were turned inward. The right foot eventually righted itself, but the left one, more seriously deformed to begin with, remained misshapen. And as the boy grew, his left leg grew more slowly than the rest of him. In fact, it never did fully develop, stayed shorter, even somewhat withered from the knee down, and at the end of all of this was a club foot. Talipes, the doctors called it, congenital, unavoidable, but deep in her heart the boy's mother believed differently. She felt that for some reason she was being punished. I mention these ambiguous yet profound guilt feelings because of the way they affected the youngster's relationship with his mother. Mummy never hugged her child, for example, never kissed him. Not ever. Not ever. It was as though she feared she had done enough damage to the boy by bringing him in, his deformity, into the world, and she would not risk harming him further, even through affection. However, the source of that chronic deprivation was an utter mystery to the youngster himself, at least until he was school age. Prior to then, and with his mother's encouragement, he believed that he was no different from any other little boy. But now it was from his schoolmates that he learned the truth, predictably cruelty. His obtrusive limp inspired the nickname Hop-along. Hop-along, they would shout, laughing, mimicking his uncontrollable hobble. Short pants were typical of small boys in those days. So his mother made him wear short pants. She thought it would help him feel normal. Of course, it only gave the other children a better look at his shriveled leg and his club foot. Meanwhile, the doctors were doing their best to alleviate the little fellow's condition, although their efforts only isolated him further. He spent month after month after month in the hospital receiving a multitude of treatments, operations, with weeks sometimes in between visits from his parents, and years would pass before the boy had gained an intuitive understanding of his mother's guilt feelings, the faceless phantoms which kept her distant. But when he was small, all he knew was that he wanted so to be loved. In fact, he would always, all his life, remember the one nurse who that one time kissed him good night. It made an impression because it was the only good-night kiss of his entire youth. But as I say, one day the boy grew up. His left leg would always be lighter and shorter. His left foot would always be misshapen. But as time passed, the little boy, grown, was to a degree compensated for the affection on which he had missed out. Because where the world once saw only a sad little frog, it would eventually hail a prince. Now, he's been gone for 7 years. Before he left us, he had become something of a sex symbol. I mean, in motion pictures, a romantic lead. Now iconic movies such as 10 and Arthur and 6 Weeks and Unfaithfully Yours, heroic successes, belying the heartbreak and the deformities and the loveless past of Dudley Moore. Only now you know the rest of the story.
And now the rest of the story. Dudley Stuart John Moore was born on April 19, 1935, in a suburb of London called Dagenham. His father, John Moore, was a railway electrician, and his mother, Ada Francis, worked as a secretary. Dudley Moore had club feet, as Mr. Harvey explained. Dudley's mother was cruel to Dudley because of the deformity and often told him that she wished he had never been born. Dudley grew up to a height of just 5 foot 2 inches, but he certainly made up for it in charm, wit, talent, charisma. Most of us Americans know Dudley Moore from a string of movies including Arthur, in which Dudley Moore plays an alcoholic billionaire playboy who will inherit $750 billion if he marries someone he doesn't love, but he falls in love with a poor waitress. Another film he's known for is 10. Everyone remembers Bo Derek's slow-motion jog on the beach. And one of my childhood favorites, Santa Claus the Movie. In Santa Claus, Dudley plays a naive elf named Patch who unintentionally helps an unscrupulous toy manufacturer played by John Lithgow take over Christmas. Most of us know little about his life before starring in Hollywood films or about his many other talents. As a child, Dudley used music as a way to escape from the cruelty that surrounded his deformity. He began playing piano and organ and was a child prodigy. Music seemed to flow from his fingertips. At the young age of 11, Dudley earned a scholarship to the Guildhall School of Music. What were you doing at age 11? I sure wasn't doing anything that productive. At the age of 14, he was playing the pipe organ at church weddings. Now, playing a pipe organ is much more involved than playing the piano or a regular organ. In addition to the keyboard and 3 pedals, which we normally see on a piano or organ, pipe organs have multiple keyboards, multiple foot pedals, and a host of knobs, couplers, and buttons. Watching someone play a pipe organ is certainly impressive. The player's body is in a constant state of motion. With so much happening simultaneously, pipe organ players can't use their eyes to watch each of their movements, so much of it is done by feel. Keep in mind that Dudley had mastered this by the age of 14, despite his deformity. Dudley earned a scholarship. Many people like to say that someone won a scholarship. Scholarships are never won, they are earned. Now I'll step down from my soapbox. Dudley earned a scholarship to Magdalen College at Oxford to study organ and composition. In the evenings, Dudley performed at jazz clubs and cabarets. Dudley quickly developed a following in nightclubs. In addition to his amazing talents, there was just something about Dudley that drew people to him. Dudley's rise in the nightclub circuit allowed him to perform with seasoned musicians such as Johnny Dankworth, noted jazz composer and saxophonist, and Cleo Lane, a singer and actress. They ended up marrying several years later. At around the same time, Dudley explored acting and comedy. Earlier I mentioned that most of us Americans learned of Dudley Moore through his Hollywood films, but the British were aware of him much earlier. In 1960, producer John Bassett was assembling a comedy revue called Beyond the Fringe. Friend and fellow Oxford student Alan Bennett suggested Dudley join the revue. Peter Cook and Jonathan Miller joined Beyond the Fringe shortly thereafter. The surreal and often biting humor of the 4-man satirical sketch show became such a hit that Dudley had to abandon his music career to perform with Beyond the Fringe. In 1963, the foursome performed in New York where they won a special Tony Award. Their brand of comedy paved the way for future comedy acts such as Monty Python's Flying Circus. In the following year, 1964, BBC gave Dudley his own TV series called Not Only, But Also. Dudley invited Peter Cook from Beyond the Fringe to be a guest on the series, but their comedic chemistry was so popular that it became the focus of the show. Their most popular bit was one they called the Dagenham Dialogues, in which Peter and Dud, those were their character names in the show, discussed a wide variety of issues from art, film, to the lifespan of geckos without a single informed idea on the subject. Unfortunately, most of the episodes of Not Only, But Also were destroyed during one of BBC's frequent eliminations of what they considered outdated programs. Dudley and Peter's popularity allowed them to appear in several films, including the 1967 film Bedazzled. This dark comedy is about a short-order cook, played by Dudley Moore, who sells his soul to the devil, played by Peter Cook, so the woman he loves will fall in love with him. Now, Dudley co-wrote the script as well as the film's pop psychedelic score. This was not a one-off thing for Dudley, no way. Dudley was a gifted composer. He wrote the scores for several films such as 30 is a Dangerous Age, Cynthia, Inadmissible Evidence, Staircase, The Hound of the Baskervilles, and 6 Weeks. In America, Dudley was cast in the supporting role in Foul Play starring Chevy Chase and Goldie Hawn. Dudley received a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor, which launched his solo film career. Dudley never fully gave up on music. In addition to film scores, Dudley released 19 jazz albums. Did you know this? In 1982, Cleo Lane and Dudley Moore released an album entitled Smilin' Through. In 1983, Cleo Lane was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Female Jazz Vocalist for her performance on that album. In the late 1980s, Dudley began struggling on film sets. He began having trouble remembering his lines, something he'd never struggled with before. He began having a hard time keeping his balance on movie sets and even in public. Reporters concluded that Dudley had a drinking problem. Dudley appeared in numerous TV and film productions in the 1990s, but his memory and balance struggles progressively worsened. In 1999, Dudley announced that he was suffering from progressive supranuclear palsy, a rare and terminal degenerative brain disease which caused the symptoms and many more that had plagued him for years. He concentrated on playing piano until the disease took that away also. In November 2001, for his contributions to the arts, Dudley was appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire at a ceremony held at Buckingham Palace. It was his last public appearance. On the morning of March 27, 2002, 66-year-old Dudley Stewart John Moore died at the home of longtime friend Renee Fruchter. Renee was holding his hand when he died and said his final words were, "I can hear the music all around me." You know, Dudley Moore was a fighter all of his life. He could have crumbled under his mother's cruel words. But in spite of his deformity, he fought and persevered. In later life, he fought hard against a disease in a battle that he knew was unwinnable. Still, he fought on. Had he not fought, the world would never have known the many talents of Dudley Moore. I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.